When we mentioned market, when I mentioned market, I said market is mostly about interaction between buyers and sellers. When we think of buyers, then we naturally focus on demand. What is demand? Well, demand simply means what buyers want and can buy at a given price over a given period of time. Look at this definition. There are 4 important elements here. They are pretty highlighted. What buyers want. All transactions are voluntary in the market, so you cannot force your buyer to buy. They must want to, they must be willing to buy. But it's not enough. They have to be able to perform the transaction. Like apart from willingness, they need, for instance, money or physical possibilities to carry out the transaction. What buyers want and can purchase at a given price. Obviously, prices are important. They are important for buyers, they are also important for sellers, but here in the definition of demand, we focus on buyers' perspective. So this is a given price, and this price is important for the question of whether buyers want and whether buyers can buy a given good. Over a given period of time, demand belongs to the broader category, economic category of so-called flows. We can only discuss demand with respect to a certain period of time. So the demand for apples can be daily, can be weekly, can be monthly, or can be annual. We cannot properly answer the question of how big is your demand for apples now, because we don't eat apples now. We buy them, we consume them over a certain period of time. So it could be 1 kilogram of apples per 1 week, and that would be okay. There are several factors, we call them determinants. There are several factors on which market demand depends on. So the question of what consumers want and can purchase depends on a number of things. First of all, as you can see, is market price. This is probably one of the most important determinants, mostly due to the fact that market prices are pretty easy to capture, to examine. Everyone knows them. Information about market price is pretty available to all interested people, buyers, sellers, or economists that research the market. Other determinants of market demand, well, these are, for instance, income. The income that you have is pretty likely to decide how much you want and can buy. In most cases, there is a positive relation between income and market demand. If your income is bigger, you tend to buy more. This situation is true for so-called normal goods. Normal goods are goods for which we could say we buy more of them if our income is bigger, unlike inferior goods. For inferior goods, we see the opposite relation. The bigger is income, the less of such goods we buy. Inferior goods are goods that we don't really like, and we could replace them with better goods. So if we buy inferior goods, we do it because we don't have enough money to buy something else. So if you don't like to take a bus to the university, and you certainly prefer taking a taxi, for instance, then bus tickets could be inferior goods to you. If your income is bigger, if your pocket money is greater, then you can skip coming to the university by bus, and you can take taxis instead of that. So bigger income could mean smaller number of bus tickets that you buy. Another factor would be prices of related goods. So if we analyze one market, like for instance, market for tea, it might be quite important to look at other goods that are related. There are two types of relations. First of all, the relation that is like between tea and sugar. If you put sugar in your tea, and if it's necessary for you to have sugar in your tea, then the quantity of tea that you buy and drink depends, on one hand, on the price of the tea itself, but it also depends on the price of sugar that is necessary for your tea. This kind of relation, this kind of goods, we call complementary goods. They complement each other. We get full utility from them if they are together. So it's like computer and internet access. They are best when they go together. This is your car and the car fuel. It's best when they are together, right? When it comes to the other relation, we've got substitutes. So there are some goods that may replace others, like in this example that was already discussed. A taxi may actually replace your bus and your bus ticket. These are substitutes. So prices of substitutes and prices of complementary goods may have also a profound impact on market demand. Preferences and fashion. Oh, this is a very important determinant, especially in some markets. Like, for instance, shoes. People want to buy shoes that are fashionable. The problem with preferences and fashion is that these things are pretty difficult to be measured. We can easily measure prices because prices are expressed in terms of money. We can measure income. This is more difficult because income is something that people are not very eager to talk about. But income is measured in terms of money. So if we can get this kind of information, what is your income, then we get a precise number. Preferences and fashion, this is something very vague. You cannot measure it exactly. Yet it is very important in many markets. The size and the structure of market. The size, well, it explains why, for instance, the Chinese market is so important for many businesses. Even if you get a tiny part of this huge market, you can sell a lot in China. So that's important. The size of market is important. The structure of the market, there are some products that are, for instance, targeted at older people. So how big is this part of the population that is relatively old? Or some products are made for young people. How many teenagers do we have in the society? Or that could be connected with, let's say, particular sports, runner shoes, right? And the question is, what part of the society actively tries to practice running? So this is why the size and the structure of market is very important. And last but not least, the most probably difficult element that shapes market demand, expectations. Consumers' expectations regarding the future value of all the above mentioned factors. Those expectations are very important. I mean, if I expect my income to grow, then I may start buying more even today because I already kind of discount this future higher income. If I know my income will be bigger, I may start buying more. Expectations about prices. If, for instance, I expect the price for the new mobile to go down in the future, I'm not going to replace my old mobile now. I will wait. I will wait till the price goes down, because this is about my expectations. Expectations are very difficult, and what's more important, remember, they don't have to be correct. If I expect that mobiles will be cheaper, I will delay my decision to buy a new one, and it doesn't matter whether actually I am right or wrong. That's the matter of the future. In the future, I will see whether I was right or I was wrong. But if I have my expectations today, then I decide today not to buy anything. So that is how expectations shape my purchase decision. How can we depict demand? Well, there is what we call graphical representation of market demand, and we call it demand curve. You could say this is simply the illustration of demand function, where quantity demanded depends on the market price. You can obviously see that this kind of demand function has all the factors, apart from the market price, kind of hidden in this D letter. So there is a certain function, there is a certain number or set of numbers or parameters that are put here, and they are responsible for all those factors like income, prices for goods, like substitutes or complementary goods, the size of market, the structure of market, expectation. This is all hidden in this D. And here, if we put it all in this D, then quantity demanded simply depends on the price, market price. Now we can draw a graph, as you can see here, right? And you can see this graph is downward sloping. So you can see that for high prices, like P1, for instance, the quantity that we buy is pretty small. This is Q1, right? A small number. And then when the price goes down, as you can see here, it corresponds with higher quantities like Q2. So when the price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. Here's the trick. Remember, the axes in this graph are inverted. The vertical axis is P, the price, and the horizontal axis is Q, the quantity. Quantity depends on the price. So this is the market price that decides upon how much we buy, not the other way around. Quantity does not influence the price. This is price influencing quantity, even though the axis could actually suggest otherwise. So be careful here. That's tricky, right? That's different than it is in mathematics. Before we actually move on, there is one more thing that we need to clarify. There is a major difference between change in demand and change in quantity demanded. Change in demand and change in quantity demanded. Two different things. The graph that you could see in the previous slide, the one that you have here on your left side, shows you the situation when the price changes and then quantity demanded also changes. Using the language of mathematics, you could say you put another value in the same function D and you get a different value as a result. So for P1, the corresponding value would be Q1. For P2, the corresponding value is Q2. If the price changes, quantity of demand changes. What is the difference between this and change in demand? Change in demand is about changing one of the factors that was hidden in this block capital letter D. So this is the change that happened to your income or prices of related goods or the structure or the size of market or your expectations. If those things change, then we speak about change in demand. The whole curve changes its location because those parameters that were hidden in D are different now. So to make it easy to understand, let's consider the market for cornflakes. Many people eat cornflakes for breakfast. And we may say that if the price of cornflakes is pretty high, like P1, people don't buy much of them because they can also make breakfast out of other things. If the price for cornflakes goes down to P2, which is a low price, then it may help actually the popularity of cornflakes for making breakfast. So people buy more like Q2 and more times, more frequently, they eat cornflakes as their breakfast. That's the first situation. That's the change in quantity demanded. Another situation is the one that is explained in the graph on your right side. So this is change in demand. So we've got a certain demand for cornflakes, we've got the price P, and people buy a certain amount of cornflakes. And this certain amount of cornflakes results from their income, size of the market, structure, expectations, other things that we already discussed. Let's imagine that something changes. For instance, people's preferences. Researchers found out that eating cornflakes is not only healthy, but also increases your IQ, makes you more clever. Also, you get one additional benefit from buying cornflakes. You not only have your breakfast, but it also makes you smarter. So that would encourage people to buy more. At the same price P, they are willing to buy more. So we see increase in demand. This is not quantity demanded that change. This is the whole demand. The whole pattern now is different because cornflakes are not only yummy and not only fast to prepare, but also valuable for your IQ. So that is the idea in the difference between the change in demand and change in quantity demand. The last element about demand that we want to discuss is the so-called law of demand. And it says, ceteris paribus, increase in the price of a certain good results in a decrease in quantity demanded of this good. First of all, what is ceteris paribus about? This is a kind of default assumption that we very often, almost always, make in economics. Ceteris paribus is like a freezing spell. You cast this spell and you freeze everything. Ceteris paribus translates into all other things equal, if nothing else changes. So, read it again. Ceteris paribus, increase in price of a good results in a decrease in quantity demanded of this good. If nothing else changes, then if the price for a certain good goes up, people buy less of this good. Why is it important to make this kind of assumption? Well, because other determinants, if they change, they could kind of break this relation. If, for instance, the price goes up by 5%, then people may buy less of a certain good. But if the price goes up by 5% and their income goes up by 20%, then actually they see this price as a lower than it used to be comparing to their income. So this effect wouldn't work, right? That's why we freeze everything. We unfreeze the price only, and we say, okay, so if this price goes up, then the quantity of demand would go down. Other things unchanged. That is ceteris paribus. And one important remark here about mathematics. Microeconomics is a course that uses mathematics quite a lot. This is not a very sophisticated maths, but obviously things like being able to calculate percentage value or to calculate very simple derivatives, that is something that you may find useful. If you don't know how to calculate percentage value, or if you don't know how to calculate derivatives, this is something that you must make up, right? You must learn that if you want to be comfortable with our course. But remember, mathematics is just a language here, and we need to understand that it cannot be fully used for our course without a deeper understanding. In many cases, we are going to say that something is equal to something else. And you know, in mathematics, this is pretty simple. If A equals B, then you can always say that B equals A, and it's always true. However, in economics, things get a bit more complicated because sometimes A equals B actually describes a certain cause and effect relationship. So for instance, you could say, if the weather is very sunny, if the summer is very sunny, and that's A, that would equal to high sales of sunglasses. Many sunglasses will be sold if the summer is very hot and sunny. Right? So we've got this A equal B. If the weather is beautiful, many sunglasses will be sold. But you cannot reverse it. I mean, how many sunglasses do you have to sell to improve the weather, to make it more sunny? No, it doesn't work this way, right? So be careful with mathematics, right? A equals B doesn't really mean that B must equal A in case of economic relations. They are not always reversible.